The next game that we have to talk about, we have Utah traveling on the road to the Swamp to take on the Florida Gators. This game is going to be played this Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Utah currently is a 3-point favorite heading into this matchup. And this is the week 1 game that I am the most excited to watch because I've been going back and forth with a lot of my friends who are Florida Gators fans all off season about this game. I've also been going back and forth with many college football fans on Twitter and Twitter Spaces talking about this matchup. Like, you guys don't know how excited I am to give you guys my preview and prediction for this matchup. Now, a lot of casuals, I don't like using that word, but you got to be labeled a casual for this. A lot of them keep saying that Utah doesn't have a chance to win this game because they're a Pac-12 team playing an SEC team. That logic doesn't make any sense to me. And if you are somebody who uses this logic, I'm sorry to tell you, you're a casual. Just because you play in a weak conference doesn't mean you're a bad team. There are plenty of bad conferences that have at least one great team. And I hate when people tie a team to a conference stigma. Like they say, just because you play in the Pac-12, you're not going to be able to be the SEC school. That doesn't make no sense to me. And if you are somebody who really watches college football and you've really watched Utah play, you would know that Utah isn't your normal run-of-the-mill Pac-12 school. They're not for Naz. This is a physical, bruising football team. Like, it doesn't matter if Florida wins or loses this game. When they wake up Sunday morning, they're going to be hurt. And they're going to be sore. Because this Utah football team, they're a bruising bunch of guys. They get after it for 4 quarters and they wear and tear you down. And when I look at Florida, Florida has a really good defense. From a talent standpoint, I like their front 7. I think that their defense is going to be improved this year. I think that their defense definitely was held back by Todd Grantham in his questionable play calling. So I definitely think that Florida's defense is going to be a lot better against the run this season compared to how they fared last year in 2021. And anytime you're trying to beat Utah, you have to be able to slow down that run game because Utah has a phenomenal stable of running backs. And their best running back is Tavion Thomas. He's the best running back in the Pac-12. And when you look at Utah's team, right, their offensive line is phenomenal. Their defensive line is really good. And a lot of people don't realize this, but Utah returns 17 out of 22 starters from last year. So this isn't an experienced team that is traveling on the road to the Swamp. And that's another thing. People keep saying, the casual fans out there keep giving Florida the victory because they're playing in the Swamp. That is one of the most casual things that a casual could say. How can you say, oh, this team's going to lose because they're playing on the road? I could understand if Utah was an inexperienced team with a first-year head coach. This isn't an inexperienced team. This is a team that returned 17 starters from last season. This is a head coach in Kyle Whittingham that is entering, his 15th or 16th season? I expect Utah to be prepared for this game. Now, of course, the heat is going to play a factor. The crowd noise is also going to play a factor as well. But at the same time, I don't think that Utah is going to lose this game strictly because they're playing in the Swamp. There definitely is going to be some other factors for why Utah could lose this game. Okay, but I just think that there are a lot of casuals out there that have a bad narrative, or they're giving Utah a bad narrative that isn't really true, because this Utah football team, to me, is one of the most talented teams in college football. However, Vegas does have Utah as a 3-point favorite for a reason, because if Utah was really as good as a team as the AP poll thinks they are, they should at least be a 7-point or 10-point favorite in this matchup. But Florida is only a 3-point favorite for a reason. And I definitely think one of the reasons is because of Anthony Richardson. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you guys know that I have this theory called the superstar quarterback theory. And I believe that in college football, if you have a superstar quarterback, as long as you have an average to above average roster around him, he can win you at least 7-8 games. So when you look at Anthony Richardson, this is somebody who is labeled in a lot of mock drafts to be a top 10 pick next year. This is also somebody who showed a lot of potential last season, a lot of flashes of greatness. He is super athletic. The dude is insanely big, has a phenomenal arm. There isn't anything that Anthony Richardson can't do. So if Anthony Richardson is as good as what myself and many other people think that he is, or he will be, I think that this game is going to be really close. On top of that, I think that there isn't a single game that Florida can't win as long as Anthony Richardson is playing at a elite level. Now, I think that Anthony Richardson is going to be really good in this game. You look at Utah, yeah, their defense is pretty good, at least when you look at their defensive line, but their secondary got torched a couple of occasions. When you look at how they fared against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, this secondary could not stop a soul. And you look at Florida's receiving core, right? I think their receiving core is a little bit underrated. Yes, they don't have insane depth like an Alabama or Ohio State, but I think that Florida has a good group of 3-4 wide receivers who should have a pretty productive game. Because Utah's secondary is pretty talented. Okay, you do have Clark Phillips, who is one of the best cornerbacks in the nation. You do have Jertravius Broughton, who is coming back fully healthy. So your cornerback position is pretty good, but at the same time, Justin Shorter, Xavier Henderson, they're also ballers as well. Then at safety, you have Cole Bishop, who returns. So Utah secondary should be majorly improved this season compared to how they performed last year, especially in that Rose Bowl against Ohio State. But anytime Utah plays an elite quarterback, their defense kind of struggles. You look at what the BYU quarterback did last season. You looked at what happened when they were matched up against CJ Stroud in the Rose Bowl. Their secondary was prone to giving up big plays. And that's something that if you're a Utah Utes fan, you don't want to see. And I think the key for Utah for winning this game is the fact that you don't want to allow Anthony Richardson to get outside the pocket and start to create. Because that's when I think Anthony Richardson is at his best. Because anytime Anthony Richardson gets outside the pocket, the dude is just magic. And I don't want to say he has like this Tebow-esque thing to him, but it's kind of like every time he gets outside the pocket, he makes a big play. So if you're Utah, force him to win from inside the pocket. And that's not a slight against him saying that he's not good inside the pocket. I'm just saying that he makes more things happen when he's outside the pocket versus when he's inside the pocket. So force him to beat you from inside the pocket. And don't allow his legs to become an equation in this game. Because you see, when you're trying to get off the field in third down situations, it's really hard to do that when you have a quarterback who's really good with his legs. Because then if you're in a 3rd and 7 or 3rd and medium situation, yeah, you got everybody covered, but yet the quarterback's still picking up the first down with his legs. So if you're Utah, the pass rush has to be there. On top of that, I wonder how Utah's linebackers are going to play in this game. Because Utah's 2 starting linebackers, Sewell and Devin Lloyd, they're gone. They're now in the NFL now. So there are 2 new expected starters for this game. Are linebacker Mahmoud Diabate, who is a transfer, ironically, from Florida. And then Lander Barton, who is a true freshman linebacker who was a top 100 player, according to 247, coming out of this past year's recruiting cycle. So Florida had a really good rushing attack last season. And I expect their ground game to be really effective this season. And you have a really good trio of running backs. You have Montrell Johnson, Naquan Wright, and Lorenzo Lingard, who had a phenomenal spring camp for Florida. So all three of those running backs are going to get some work in this game. On top of that, you have to account for what Anthony Richardson does on the ground as well. So I want to see how Mahmoud Diabate and Lander Barton perform in this game, because the defensive line, I think, is going to be really good. It really just depends on how great the linebacker play is going to be when it comes to being able to slow down that Florida rushing attack. And same thing can be said for, Florida's linebackers. I think that Florida has a very good group of linebackers, but they weren't very good against the run last season. Now, of course, them having a new defensive coordinator, not named Todd Grantham, should hopefully elevate their play. But one thing that I definitely feel is a huge mismatch when you compare Utah's offense to Florida's defense is the tight end position. Okay, Utah has probably the second best tight end duo in college football, or the second best tight end room in the nation behind Georgia. The Utes have Brent Keithy and Dalton Kincaid. Now, both of these two guys are going to be a major part of Utah's passing game this year. So for Florida, how are you going to be able to slow down these guys? Because these guys accounted for the majority of the passing attack last year for Utah. And if you can't slow neither one of these two players down, you're not going to have a lot of success slowing down Utah's offense on the defensive side of things. So how can Florida slow down these tight ends? Because honestly, I don't really think they're going to be able to, because I don't really think they have great coverage linebackers, and you're not going to put a safety on either one of these guys, because most safeties aren't really all that great when it comes to one-on-one coverage, and I don't really think that Florida has any safety on their roster that could man up any one of these tight ends one-on-one and win. And then another thing simply is due to the fact that, you're not going to put a cornerback on these tight ends, because most cornerbacks are going to be too small to match up with these tight ends, who also are very physical as well. And they're also very good after the catch also. So I think that Utah has a big advantage when it comes to their tight ends going against Florida's defense. I don't really think that Florida is going to have a legitimate answer for how to slow down the combination of Kincaid and Keithy. Now, you look at Florida's wide receivers. I want to go back to their wide receivers. There was a wide receiver that I didn't mention when I gave my early thoughts on this game. A lot of Florida fans kept bringing it up. And this wide receiver was Ricky Parcells, who is a transfer from Arizona State. Now, this guy is a speed demon. This dude absolutely has some wheels. He can run with the best of them. Many Florida fans feel like he's going to have a significant impact in this game. And there's been a lot of great reports about Parcells coming out of fall camp for Florida. And many people do expect him to have a role in this offense. However, I look at Utah's secondary, and the talent is there. And even though they weren't great last year in certain games, you got to remember the fact that Jerchavius Broughton only played in 2 games last season. He had his season cut short due to a season-ending injury. So he's going to be back fully healthy. So pretty much Utah secondary is pretty much the closest thing to near strength as you can get. So I look at Florida's wide receivers, and I just wonder, this is a really good group. But at the same time, Utah secondary should improve. So I wonder who's going to come out on the winning end of that matchup, the wide receivers of Florida or the Utah secondary. Now, when it comes to the defensive line of Utah versus the offensive line of Florida, ladies and gentlemen, we may have a little bit of a stalemate, because Florida's offensive line going into 2022 is probably the best it's been in a very long time. As a matter of fact, many Florida fans I've talked to consider this to be the best offensive line that the Gators have had since God knows when. And that's going to be major in this game, because it's going to allow Florida to keep Anthony Richardson upright. And on top of that, it's going to allow them to create holes in the running game. So for Utah, this is a team that loves to run the ball down your throat and control time of possession. They want to keep your defense on the field tire them out and keep your offense off the field. So if you're Florida, you can't afford to make too many mistakes when you're playing a team like Utah, because you never know when you're going to touch the ball again. If you go 3 and out, and let's say you give Utah the ball back with 12 minutes in the first quarter, you may not touch the ball again in the first quarter until the last 4 minutes. So if you're Florida, you have to make the most out of every single possession. And on top of that, you're going to need your offensive line to make sure that those big guys that Utah has up front are taken care of. And Utah is going to have to be able to make sure that they can have a couple of guys that can come off the bench and keep their starters fresh until the fourth quarter. Because anytime you're playing in the Florida Heat, depth is always a huge issue. Now, you look at Florida's defensive line, a lot of my friends feel really confident in how Florida's defensive line is going to perform in this game. Now, I love their starters. Okay, Brandon Cox is one of my favorite players in college football. You also do have defensive tackle Gervin Dexter, who is one of the best D tackles in the SEC this season. So you have a good amount of talent up front. However, I know Florida has talent when it comes to their core starters, but I don't know how great their depth is going to be. Because if we're going to use the Florida Heat against Utah, we got to have the same thing when it comes to Florida as well. Because you can say, well, JT, they practice in the Florida Heat. And listen, like, it doesn't matter how much you practice in the Florida Heat. I mean, if you get hot, you get hot. Everybody gets fatigued. So I know that Utah has a lot of depth when it comes to their defensive line, but I don't know if Florida has enough depth to keep their starters from getting fatigued before the fourth quarter. That's one thing that I do have a question mark when it comes to Florida's defense, is definitely their depth when it comes to the D-line. Now, when it comes to Florida's cornerback position, I don't really know how big of a factor it's going to be, simply for the fact that, yeah, Utah has a solid group of wide receivers, but the majority of their offense came from their tight ends in the passing game, and one of their best wide receivers left for the NFL. So, I look at Florida's secondary in this game, and honestly, if they can find a way to slow down the tight ends of Utah, they have a very high chance of being able to shut down Utah's passing attack. And then when it comes to Utah's offense, you have Cam Rising, who may be one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football. This is somebody who has a pretty decent arm, but at the same time, this dude is a better athlete than what you may think. And a lot of Florida fans always say, well, Utah struggled early on last season. And yeah, Utah is prone to struggle early in the season. However, you got to remember, last season, Utah is a different team once Cam Rising became the quarterback. Okay, this was a team that barely lost once Cam Rising took over the reins as the starter. So I look at Utah and I look at this team and the experience that they have. I think they're going to be able to go on the road into the swamp and they're going to be able to come out alive. I think they're going to win this game. Now, I'm not expecting this to be a blowout. I do think that Florida is going to hang around in this game, and this game is going to come down to the final minutes. But I do think that Utah wins this game 28-24 is my final prediction for this matchup. Because I really do see Florida winning this game in upset fashion. However, I'm going with Utah simply for the fact that I trust Kyle Whittingham and his coaching staff. And I like the fact that they have a veteran team that only has a couple of new starters. So you're going to have a team that, yeah, the crowd noise may be super loud, but they're experienced. They're veterans. So you shouldn't be seeing a lot of false start penalties on the offensive line. You shouldn't see a team get rattled on the road, even though playing on the road in the swamp is probably the biggest game that they're going to have on the road when it comes to crowd intensity all year. But I do think that this coaching staff and this veteran team, they're going to be able to overcome the obstacles of playing on the road in the swamp. And I think that they're going to be able to get the win against Florida. So give me Utah to win outright, and I'm going to take them to cover.